Since the new administration came in, we have seen Donald's deportation policies from the border to courtrooms across the country, leaving a trail of controversy and fear. Is this a fight for security or a political power move? Let's dive in. First, we have White House border czar Tom Homan, one of the most thuggish human beings to roam the planet, initially claiming that ICE would prioritize immigrants with criminal records and not conduct mass roundups. Officials, of course, though, have ordered ICE to ramp up daily arrests from a few hundred to at least 1,200 to 1,500, with field officers mandated to make 75 arrests a day. Current and former ICE officials warn that pressure to meet quotas could lead to indiscriminate enforcement and potential civil rights abuses. Gee, I think they would have thought of that before putting quotas in place in the first place. But this is Major General William Einyart, a former U.S. congressman, speaking out against this practice.
Anytime that you put quotas on law enforcement personnel, they're going to meet those quotas. And so they're going to pick up whoever they can or need to. And whether, as has already happened in New Jersey, there was a U.S. citizen who's a veteran who was picked up and detained by ICE. So certainly that's going to happen. Anytime you put a quota on a law enforcement officer, that's a bad idea. Law enforcement officers are supposed to use their discretion. And by forcing them to make arrests, you're simply asking for an abuse of their police powers.
Yeah. Remember the phrase serve and protect? Not so much anymore. I think that some of what the former general just warned us about, or the major general, I should say, just warned us about, is already happening. And arrest operations have begun in cities like Chicago and are likely to expand or expected to expand into other blue sanctuary cities, with additional federal agencies, including the FBI, assisting in enforcement efforts. Let's take a look.
Well, yes, we're learning that the Trump administration is planning 3 operations per week. We've already seen Chicago earlier this week, today, New York City, and then this Thursday, Aurora, Colorado, a place that President Trump has repeatedly talked about during his campaign stops. And then another 3 cities next week, although those haven't been confirmed just yet.
ICE and the White House denied this or refused to comment at all on the directive. There's a lot more to get to, but first, if you could please like and share this video. Also, if you haven't yet, please subscribe to our channel. And after you subscribe, just click the bell, and that way you'll be alerted anytime a new video drops. Thanks for listening to our new podcast. We are now available on all podcast platforms. So follow us here, and please give us a 5-star rating, because it really does help other people find our content. Okay, so we know now that the Laken Riley bill has been signed into law. Here is a clip.
Since we've gathered this afternoon to take another historic action, however, in a few moments, the Laken Riley Act will become the very first bill that I proudly sign into law as the 42nd President of the United States.
This bill was approved by the House 263 to 156 on Wednesday, the 29th, and 46 Democrats joined. The measure also passed the Senate with 12 Democrats. Neither the House of Representatives nor the Senate, controlled by Republicans, needs any Democrats to join them in order to pass bills. And this should be something that the Democrats are ashamed of. It is a terrible bill written by Rep. Mike Collins, a Republican from Georgia. Well, that's how you know it's a terrible bill. It was written by a Republican. The Laken Riley Act bears the name of a nursing school student who was murdered last year in Georgia by a Venezuelan citizen. The act requires Immigration and Customs Enforcement to detain undocumented immigrants who are arrested or face charges or who have been convicted of burglary, theft, larceny, or shoplifting. Okay. There are already laws that call for the removal of immigrants or undocumented workers who commit crimes. What this does is make it open season on immigrants. Because remember, it says immigrants who are arrested or face charges. Last I checked, in this country, you are innocent until proven guilty. But I guess that only applies to rich, white. I'm just going to edit myself and leave it at that. Rich white men. On the 29th, as we saw, Donald signed a memorandum that calls for the Defense and Homeland Security Departments to provide additional detention space at Guantanamo for, quote, high priority criminal aliens unlawfully present in the United States, unquote. Check out this clip.
Today, I'm also signing an executive order to instruct the Departments of Defense and Homeland Security to begin preparing the 30,000-person migrant facility at Guantanamo Bay. Most people don't even know about it. We have 30,000 beds in Guantanamo to detain the worst criminal illegal aliens threatening the American people. Some of them are so bad we don't even trust the countries to hold them because we don't want them coming back, so we're going to send them out to Guantanamo.
Yes, again, please save room for that person. Whenever Donald says most people don't know about this, it's because it's not a thing that's true. There are not 30,000 beds in Guantanamo. There aren't 15,000 beds in Guantanamo. But it is still alarming that he is ordering. Well, it's alarming that he's in a position to order anything, but I guess I'm just going to have to get over that. It's alarming that he has plans to reopen Guantanamo Bay and that his administration is looking to round up and incarcerate that many people. Of course, there are logistical and legal challenges to the extent they care. U.S. officials are warning that Guantanamo's facilities are no longer equipped to accommodate such a large number of detainees, requiring significant additional staffing and resources. Cuban President Miguel Diaz-Canel condemned the plan to detain illegal immigrants at Guantanamo Bay, calling it, quote, an act of brutality on illegally occupied Cuban territory, unquote. He claimed the facility has been used for torture and illegal detention. He claimed that because it has been. Critics argue that this, of course, could worsen humanitarian issues and strain U.S. international relations, which is the point, while raising legal and ethical concerns over migrant detention. Now, we know that the Trump administration doesn't care about legal or ethical concerns. And it's also becoming increasingly clear as well that they do not care how they damage America's relationships with its allies. Caroline Leavitt, who is the new press secretary, claimed that all 3,500 immigrants recently arrested were criminals, despite illegal presence in the U.S. being a civil violation, not a crime. Here she is with more.
Of my colleague, Mr. Homan, while this has been a great start, we will not get complacent. The previous administration allowed tens of millions of illegal people into the interior of our country.
Illegal people. We're doing that now, are we? Yeah. Federal law does not classify undocumented presence as a criminal defense, right? You're allowed to come into the country. There are certain processes you need to go through in order to stay, but you're allowed to come here. And detained immigrants do have rights to an immigration hearing, to due process before deportation. Somebody should probably tell the Trump administration, but again, they don't care. Since Bill Clinton's presidency, U.S. policy has focused on deporting those convicted of serious crimes after serving sentences, contrary to Donald's quote unquote new approach. Immigrant rights groups predict that Donald is going to use this framing of undocumented workers as criminals to justify deporting nonviolent immigrants, despite data showing that undocumented immigrants commit crimes at lower rates than United States citizens. Unless, of course, you're Donald Trump, in which case you commit many, 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 many more crimes than undocumented immigrants, you actually get found guilty of such crimes, but then you get away with it. So who cares? Donald has ordered ICE to investigate. Has ordered ICE's investigative division to shift from crimes like human trafficking and terrorism, which are very serious crimes, to immigration enforcement, reducing resources for other federal investigations, which is just utter madness. White House, the border czar, Homan, had this to say about the enormous price tag.
President Trump's border czar, Tom Homan, figures the plan for mass deportations of illegal migrants will cost around $86 billion to execute.
This operation is going to be expensive, but at the end of it, we're going to save the taxpayers billions of dollars.
I think we're going to have to change his voice too. He is just unbearable and maddening. So here's another example. Just quick, $86 billion. Does that sound like a good use of our money? And here's another example of the savings being passed down to the American taxpayer. Take a look at this report.
So this is a U.S. military aircraft. It's a C-17. These are meant to fly not only U.S. troops around the world, but also tons of cargo. The Trump administration is using these same military planes for deportations. The Trump administration used this C-17 last week to deport 80 people from Texas to Guatemala. And typically, the government hires a plane for the day to do deportations. They charter a traditional civilian-style aircraft, costs around $8,000 an hour. If you did it the old way, on a normal non-military plane, that would have cost taxpayers a little over $100,000. But that, of course, is not how the Trump administration is doing it, because look how tough it makes them look to use these big military planes instead. The plane in...
Yeah, tough. Another thing we need to keep in mind is the cost to communities. Another thing, of course, the Trump administration could care less about, or I should say couldn't care less about. Schools and churches are now fair game for ICE officials to stomp in and arrest law-abiding people to ship them off to Guantanamo Bay or their countries of origin, although some of them that they've been hauling in are U.S. citizens. So I'm not really sure what's happening there. Take a look at this clip.
President Trump has promised to deport millions of immigrants to their home countries. And today, the Department of Homeland Security announced it is widening the net. A new policy gives ICE agents the green light to conduct enforcement operations in schools, churches, playgrounds, and daycare centers. Those locations used to be off limits. Now, ICE can look for people in those places to deport. The mayor of Denver telling Top Story last night, those sensitive areas are a big concern for his city.
Churches, schools, hospitals, they've long been no-go locations for ICE because to run a safe city, we have to have a hospital that everyone can go to if they're in an emergency without worrying about getting deported. We have to have kids be able to go to school without worrying about their status or their parents' status.
Playgrounds. Churches literally used to be sanctuaries. But that's the point too. Making sure nobody feels safe. Of course, it's also about the spectacle. I mean, seriously, they're ordering the planes out of central casting, just like the Secretary of Defense. So look at this clip. This is CBS News talking to newly confirmed Secretary of Homeland Security, the puppy murderer, Christine.
Federal law enforcement is working with limited help from New York City police because of the city's laws protecting undocumented immigrants.
Some might say, isn't New York a sanctuary city? But you said the mayor's been cooperative.
The mayor's been fantastic. In fact, I talked to him on the phone probably 4 or 5 times last night. One of these individuals was so dangerous that we needed the backup of the NYPD to be there in case things went south.
Today's Bronx operation required around 36 law enforcement, yielding a handful of arrests.
Are you aware you're in violation of our laws?
You want cameras at these events, don't you? And some would say you want this spectacle to be filmed.
It's not a spectacle. This is our nation's law enforcement judicial process. The scales of justice are equally applied to everybody. We want transparency on this.
First of all, Chrissy, you look like an idiot. I've been taking the New York City subway since I was 11 years old, and I never felt the need to put on a flak jacket and a bulletproof vest, you moron. Also, the spectacle is the point. The spectacle for the base, to keep them angry and full of hate, which seems to be the only thing that keeps these people going. And the spectacle that is going to stab at the heart of those people who are just in this country to make a better lives for themselves and their families. Also, as for Eric Adams, he's as corrupt as Donald Trump. He's a Democrat in name only, and it should not surprise us that he is now a regular on Fox News, because he has literally no principles or ethics at all. And New York, get better at picking your mayors, please. We're learning that the Oklahoma Board of Education has voted to require immigration status reporting. The state board, which is led by officials thoroughly aligned with Donald, approved a rule requiring parents to report their immigration status when enrolling their kids in school. The rule still needs legislative and gubernatorial approval, but it's Oklahoma, so I'm fairly certain that that will be coming in short order. Quote, all children have a constitutional right to equal access to education, regardless of their citizenship or immigration status, the National Immigration Law Center said in a statement objecting to the rule change. Quote, requiring school districts to collect information about immigrant status illegally chills access to this opportunity, interfering with their ability to focus on their core mission to educate children and give all students the ability to grow, thrive, and participate fully in our democracy. They do not want children to grow and thrive and participate fully in our democracy. Here's Superintendent Ryan Walters, in his own words, trying to clarify the new rule.
Our rule around illegal immigration accounting is simply that. It is to account for how many students of illegal immigrants are in our schools.
Superintendent Ryan Walters opened the Board of Education meeting trying to clarify this rule surrounding collecting documentation to prove citizenship status when enrolling in school. Walters said the rule tracks how many students of undocumented immigrants are in Oklahoma schools. But board members had more questions, like is it tracking immigration status or documentation?
You are
Seems to me that you should really be very clear about what you want in a law before you write it. Now, for the time being, Oklahoma City Public Schools stated they will not collect immigration status, citing public federal law protecting every child's right to public education, but wait for that to be challenged. Similar measures, such as Alabama's 2011 attempt to track student immigration status, have been blocked or overturned in federal courts, but with this corrupt, illegitimate supermajority of the Supreme Court and the Fifth Circuit, I'm not sanguine. Advocates, of course, are warning of the chilling effect on immigrant families. Critics argue the policy will deter undocumented students from enrolling. I think that will make it almost impossible for immigrant students to enroll, despite the Supreme Court's 1982 case, Plyer versus Doe, ruling affirming the right to education. But again, we live in completely different times, and there is no such thing as precedent or stare decisis anymore. Part of the, I just want to talk briefly about the broader GOP crackdown on immigration. There are proposals that align with Donald's mass deportation plans, and recent executive orders allowing ICE to arrest people in schools reverses previous policy. And as we're seeing, it is expanding. And we knew this was going to happen. We knew because they told us. What's clear about these actions is that this is not at all about securing the country. This isn't just a fight over policy. This is about who we are, who we want to be, who we think we are. I mean, look, we need those of us who care, those of us who still have empathy, we need to hang on to that. But at the same time, you know that perennial question, is this who we are? Or people often saying this is not who we are? Yes, it is. Let's dispense with that pretense, shall we? This is exactly who we are now. So we need to figure out what we're going to do about it. We have 2 years. Actually, we have until 2026. So let's start figuring out now. Thank you very much for joining me. I know this is a very tough topic, but we need to be aware of what's going on. And remember that things like the illegal, unconstitutional budget freeze that they tried to enact a couple of days ago, although it did create real confusion and panic and chaos, and it did actually impact people's lives, it was also a smokescreen so they can keep doing cruel stuff like this. All right, let's keep this conversation going. Please leave me your comments, and I will see you all later. Thanks. Please take a second and like and share this video. It'd be awesome if you could subscribe to the channel. If you're listening to us in podcast form, please follow us and give the show a 5-star rating because it really does help other people find our content. Thanks.